The Fall of Earth Admiral Una Park stood on the bridge of the Resolute and watched her world die. Through the massive windows of the warship, she could see Earth burning. Orange flames spread across continents like a disease. Smoke rose from cities that had stood for thousands of years. The planet that had given birth to all of humanity was being murdered, and she could do nothing to stop it. The alien fleet was too large, too powerful. The Galactic Hegemony had sent over 50,000 ships to destroy one small planet. They called it justice. They called it necessary. Admiral Park called it what it really was: genocide. "Admiral, we have lost contact with the Asian defense grid," reported Commander Do-Hyun Lee. His voice was calm, but his hands shook as he worked his console. He was young, only 32 years old, and he had never seen anything like this. Nobody had. Europe has gone silent. North America is reporting total collapse of orbital defenses. Admiral Park nodded slowly. She had expected this. The hegemony had planned their attack perfectly. They had waited until humanity's fleet was spread thin across their small territory. They had struck without warning, without mercy, without any chance for negotiation. "How many ships do we have left?" she asked. 47 combat vessels, Admiral, and approximately 12,000 civilian transports. 47 ships against 50,000. It was not a battle. It was an execution. But Admiral Park had not become the highest-ranking officer in humanity's navy by giving up easily. She had a plan. It was desperate and dangerous and would probably kill everyone who attempted it. But it was better than staying here and dying like animals. "Contact Captain Minji Cho," she ordered. "Tell her to begin the evacuation immediately. Every civilian transport leaves in the next 30 minutes. No exceptions." Commander Lee looked at her with wide eyes. "Admiral, the experimental warp drives have never been tested for such long distances. We do not even know if they will work. The ships could be torn apart. Everyone could die. Everyone will definitely die if they stay here," Admiral Park replied. "At least this way, they have a chance." On the other side of the burning planet, Captain Minji Cho received her orders and immediately began shouting commands. She was a small woman with short black hair and eyes that had seen too much death in the past few hours. Her ship, the Morning Star, was an old transport vessel. It was never designed for war. But today, it would lead the most important mission in human history. "All civilian vessels, this is Captain Cho," she broadcast across every channel. "We are leaving. Follow my ship exactly. Do not deviate from the flight path. Do not stop for anything. If you fall behind, we cannot wait for you." 40 million people. That was all that remained of 8 billion. 40 million scared, confused, grieving humans packed into 12,000 ships. Children who had watched their parents die. Parents who had lost their children. Entire families erased in moments by alien weapons that turned cities into glass. The ships began to move. They were not military vessels. They were cargo ships, passenger liners, mining transports, anything that could fly and hold people. Many were damaged. Some were barely functional. But they flew anyway because the alternative was death. Admiral Park watched them go from the bridge of the Resolute. She felt something wet on her cheek and realized she was crying. She had not cried since she was a child. But watching her species flee their home like frightened animals broke something inside her. "Admiral," Commander Lee said softly, "the Hegemony fleet is moving to intercept the evacuation." Of course they were. The Hegemony did not want survivors. They did not want witnesses. They wanted humanity to disappear completely, as if they had never existed at all. "All combat vessels," Admiral Park announced. "This is your final order. We will engage the enemy fleet and buy time for the evacuation. We will not survive this. But our people might. 47 ships turned toward 50,000. It was suicide. Every officer on every bridge knew it. But not a single ship hesitated. Not a single crew member ran. They had families on those transport ships. They had friends, lovers, children, and they would burn in nuclear fire before they let the hegemony touch them. The battle lasted 11 minutes. The Resolute was the last human warship to fall. Admiral Park stood on her bridge as explosions tore through the hull. Fire consumed the corridors behind her. Commander Lee was already dead, killed by a console that exploded in his face. But she remained standing, watching through the cracked windows as the transport ships reached the edge of the system. Captain Cho's voice came through the static. "Admiral, we are ready to jump. The warp drives are charged." "Then go," Admiral Park whispered. "Go and survive. Go and remember. Go and make them regret this day." The Morning Star activated its experimental warp drive. The ship stretched, twisted, and then vanished into a tunnel of light that led nowhere any human had ever been. One by one, 12,000 ships followed, disappearing from known space forever. The hegemony's supreme chancellor, a massive insectoid creature named Vexal, watched from his flagship as the human ships vanished. He was not concerned. The warp drives were experimental, untested. The ships would probably be destroyed in transit. And even if they survived, they were jumping into the void between galaxies, where there was nothing but darkness and death. "Record this moment," he commanded. "Broadcast it to every world in the hegemony. Let them see what happens to species that do not know their place." The recording showed Earth crumbling, continents shattering, oceans boiling away into steam. 8 billion lives erased in hours. The hegemony celebrated. They held festivals. They declared a holiday to commemorate the cleansing of the human threat. They wrote humanity into their history books as a cautionary tale. A primitive species that had grown too ambitious. A civilization that had challenged the natural order and paid the ultimate price. They were so certain that humanity was dead, they stopped watching the void. They stopped searching for survivors. They forgot about the 12,000 ships that had vanished into the darkness. That was their mistake, because deep in the space between galaxies, surrounded by nothing but cold and silence, Captain Minji Cho looked out at her ragged fleet of survivors. 40 million humans, wounded, broken, but alive. "We made it," she said softly. The Morning Star drifted in the darkness, its engines cooling, its crew exhausted. Around it, 12,000 ships hung in the void like stars. Inside those ships, children asked their parents what would happen next. Parents had no answers. They only had hope. Captain Cho activated the fleet-wide communication channel. Her voice reached every ship, every survivor, every soul who had escaped the death of Earth. "We are alone," she said. "We are far from everything we knew. We have lost our home, our families, our world. But we are alive. And as long as we are alive, we are dangerous. The hegemony thinks we are dead. Let them think that. Let them forget us. Because one day, we will return. And on that day, they will remember why they were afraid of us." 40 million humans listened to her words. And in the darkness between galaxies, something new was born. Not just a fleet of refugees. Not just survivors. A promise. A patient, burning promise of vengeance. The silent centuries, the first 20 years were the hardest. People called them the years of dying. Director Jisoo Kim stood in the medical bay of the New Dawn and watched another child take her last breath. The girl was only 7 years old. She had survived the destruction of Earth, the desperate escape, the terrifying jump through experimental warp drives. But she could not survive the slow death of starvation. Food was running out. The ships had been designed for short trips, not for carrying 40 million people across the void between galaxies. Water recyclers failed. Air filters clogged with dust and broke. Engines burned through fuel faster than anyone had predicted. "How many did we lose today?" Director Kim asked her assistant, a young man named Taeyong. He was her grandson, born on the New Dawn 3 years after the escape from Earth. He had never seen a blue sky or felt rain on his face. He knew only metal walls and recycled air. 47, Taeyang replied quietly. Mostly children and elderly. The Starboard Hope lost power to their life support for 6 hours. They lost 200. Director Kim closed her eyes. 200 more names to add to the list. 200 more bodies to send into the void. They could not afford to bury their dead. They could not afford the resources to preserve them. They simply opened airlocks and let the darkness take them. But humanity did not give up. They never had. From the caves of ancient Earth to the burning cities of the apocalypse, humans had always found a way to survive. Dr. Sujin Han was one of the reasons they survived now. She was a scientist, a genius who had been working on theoretical physics when the hegemony attacked. Now she worked on keeping people alive. She redesigned water recyclers to be 3 times more efficient. She created new methods of growing food in the artificial light of ship engines. She found ways to stretch every resource further than anyone thought possible. "The human body is remarkably adaptable," she told her students, a group of young people who had been children during the escape. "We can survive on fewer calories than the hegemony believes. We can breathe air they would consider too thin. We are harder to kill than they ever imagined." Dr. Han also worked on something else. Something secret. Something that would change everything. The hegemony controlled all advanced technology in the galaxy. Every species used the same basic designs because the hegemony decided what was allowed. Weapons could only be so powerful. Shields could only be so strong. Warp drives could only go so fast. Any species that tried to develop something new was punished or destroyed. But humanity was no longer in the galaxy. They were free from hegemony control. They could build whatever they wanted. "We will not just copy their technology," Dr. Han declared at a meeting of the fleet's leaders. "We will surpass it. We will create things they have never seen. And when we return, they will face weapons they cannot understand." The work began slowly. Scientists from every ship shared their knowledge through flickering communication channels. Engineers took apart old machines and found new ways to put them back together. Failures were common. Explosions killed researchers. Experiments destroyed entire ships, but progress happened. Bit by bit, year by year, humanity climbed forward. General Jun Yuk-beek built the new military. He was an old soldier who had fought in the final battle above Earth. He had watched Admiral Park die. He had sworn an oath over her burning ship that he would train a force capable of avenging her. "Every person in this fleet will learn to fight," he announced. "Not because we want war, but because war is coming, whether we want it or not. When we return, the hegemony will try to destroy us again. And this time, we will be ready." Children trained with weapons before they learned to read. Teenagers studied battle tactics alongside mathematics. Every engineer understood how their work contributed to the war effort. Every scientist knew their research would one day be used against the hegemony. It was not a happy existence. It was not a free existence. But it was survival. And survival was all that mattered. 50 years after leaving Earth, the fleet found something that changed everything. Scout ships had been exploring the void for decades, searching for anything useful. Mostly they found nothing. Empty space, dead rocks, endless darkness. But then a young pilot named Seung-ho Yoon discovered something impossible. A planet. Not just any planet. a rogue world, drifting alone through the space between galaxies. It had no star to orbit. It had no light to warm its surface. It was a frozen ball of ice and rock, completely dead and utterly worthless. Except it was massive. Larger than Earth had been. Large enough to support 40 million people. Large enough to build cities. Large enough to become a home. Director Jisoo. Kim was very old when she first saw the planet through the windows of the new dawn. Her hair was white, her face lined with wrinkles, her body weak from decades of rationed food and recycled air. But her eyes still shone with determination. "We will call it Haven," she said softly, "and we will make it ours." The work took 100 years. They could not live on the surface because there was no atmosphere and no warmth. So they went underground. They drilled into the planet's crust. They carved out massive caverns. They built cities in the darkness, lit by artificial suns powered by nuclear reactors. Haven became humanity's new home. Not a replacement for Earth. Nothing could ever replace Earth. But a place where children could run and play. Where families could live in real buildings instead of cramped ships. Where people could look up at a ceiling instead of metal walls and pretend. It was a sky. Dr. Sujin Han did not live to see Haven completed. But her students carried on her work. They built weapons that could destroy hegemony ships from distances the aliens thought impossible. They created shields that absorbed energy instead of blocking it, becoming stronger with every hit. They designed warp drives that left no signatures, allowing ships to appear anywhere without warning. The hegemony has not improved their technology in 10,000 years, explained Dr. Hyunwoo Nam, who had taken over the research division. They see no need to change. They believe they have reached perfection. But we have been improving every day for 200 years. The gap between us is enormous, and they do not even know it. General Jin Yuk-beek died at the age of 97. But his granddaughter, General Yeji-beek, continued his work. Under her command, the fleet grew from 12,000 ships to over 40,000. Each ship was better than anything the hegemony possessed. Each crew was trained to a level of skill the aliens could not imagine. "We are ready," General Yeji-beek reported to the Council of Elders on the 300th anniversary of the escape from Earth. "The fleet is prepared. Our weapons are superior. Our soldiers are trained. We can return." The council was silent for a long moment. These were the children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren of survivors. They had been born in the void. They had lived their entire lives preparing for this moment. Some of them were eager for vengeance. Others were afraid of what might happen. Finally, Fleet Admiral Bunhoon Kang spoke. He was the highest military commander, a direct descendant of Captain Minji Cho, who had led the evacuation 3 centuries ago. 300 years ago, the hegemony tried to erase us from existence, he said slowly. They burned our world. They murdered our people. They celebrated our deaths. And they forgot about us. He stood, his tall figure casting a shadow across the council chamber. It is time to remind them. Across Haven, across the fleet, across every corner of human civilization, the order spread. Ships powered up engines that had waited decades for this moment. Soldiers put on armor designed for battles that had been imagined for centuries. Families said goodbye to loved ones, knowing some would never return. The silent fleet began to move. 40,000 ships rising from Haven's surface, forming into perfect formations, preparing for the long jump back to the galaxy that had tried to destroy them. 300 years of silence was about to end. And the hegemony was about to learn what humanity had become. The return ambassador Haijin Yoon of the Valoran Republic thought she was seeing a ghost. She stood in the Grand Assembly Hall on Nexus Prime, the capital of the Galactic Hegemony. Around her, representatives from 800 species gathered for the annual summit. It was a grand ceremony, a display of power, a reminder of who ruled the galaxy. The hegemony loved these events. They used them to show off their strength, to remind smaller species of their place, to celebrate the perfect order they had created. This year, they were unveiling a new monument, a statue of Supreme Chancellor Vex'al, commemorating the 300th anniversary of the Great Cleansing. The Great Cleansing. That was what they called the genocide of humanity. They had turned murder into a holiday. They had made extinction into a celebration. Ambassador Yoon remembered the stories her grandmother had told her. The Valorans had been friends with humans once, long ago. They had traded with Earth, shared knowledge, built relationships. And then the hegemony had demanded they choose sides. The Valorans had chosen the hegemony. They had watched Earth burn. They had said nothing. Her grandmother had never forgiven herself. Ambassador Yoon carried that shame like a weight on her shoulders. The ceremony began with Supreme Chancellor Vex'al taking the stage. He was ancient now, over 400 years old, but his species lived for centuries. His hard shell was decorated with medals and honors. His clicking voice filled the hall as he spoke of peace, of order, of the necessity of removing threats before they could grow. 300 years ago, we faced a crisis, Vex'al declared. A young species grew too ambitious. They threatened the stability of our galaxy. We had no choice but to act. And because of our courage, because of our determination, the human threat was eliminated forever. The assembled delegates applauded. Most of them had not been alive during the destruction of Earth. They knew only what the hegemony told them. They believed humans had been monsters, dangerous creatures who deserved what they got. Ambassador Yoon did not applaud. She stared at her hands and thought about her grandmother's. Tears. And then the sky changed. It started as a flicker on the massive display screens that showed the space above Nexus Prime. A sensor glitch, everyone assumed. The hegemony's technology was old but reliable. Nothing ever went wrong, but the flicker became a wave. Then a storm. Then something impossible. Warp signatures. Thousands of them. Tens of thousands of them. Ships were appearing in the space above the capital world. More ships than anyone had ever seen in one place. They came from nowhere, emerging from warp space without any warning, without any of the normal energy signatures that should have announced their arrival. The hall fell silent. 800 species stared at the screens, trying to understand what they were seeing. Supreme Chancellor Vex'al's clicking voice cut through the confusion. Identify those ships immediately. Which species dares to threaten the capital of the hegemony? A communication officer answered, his voice shaking. Supreme Chancellor, we cannot identify them. They do not match any known design. Their technology is completely unknown. That is impossible. Every species in the galaxy uses our technology. There is nothing unknown. The screens flickered again. And then a face appeared. It was a human face. Fleet Admiral Byung-Hung Kan looked out at the assembly hall with cold eyes. He was an older man with gray hair and a scar across his left cheek. He wore a uniform that nobody recognized, black and silver with a symbol on the chest that showed Earth surrounded by stars. "This is the United Human Remnant," he said. His voice was calm, almost gentle. "We have returned." The silence in the hall was absolute. 800 species stared at the screens, unable to comprehend what they were hearing. Humans were dead. Humans had been dead for 3 centuries. Every child learned about their extinction in school. Every history book confirmed it. But the man on the screen was clearly human. And the ships surrounding Nexus Prime were clearly real. Supreme Chancellor Vex'al recovered first. He was a politician, after all. He knew how to hide his fear behind words. "This is impossible," he declared. "You cannot be human." Humanity was destroyed. I was there. I watched it happen. Admiral Kang smiled. It was not a friendly smile. Yes, you were there. You gave the order to attack without warning. You commanded the destruction of our cities. You watched 8 billion people die and called it a victory. We did what was necessary. Humans were a threat to galactic stability. You were violent, aggressive, dangerous. You left us no choice. We were children compared to you. We had barely left our own solar system. We posed no threat to anyone except your pride. Admiral Kang leaned forward. But you were right about one thing. We were dangerous. And now we are much more dangerous than you could ever imagine. The screen showed the human fleet spreading out across the system. 40,000 ships, each one larger and more advanced than anything the hegemony possessed. They moved with perfect coordination, surrounding the defensive stations, blocking all escape routes. Ambassador Yoon watched with tears in her eyes. She thought of her grandmother, who had died still carrying guilt for the role her species had played in humanity's destruction. She thought of all the years of shame, all the stories that had been passed down through generations. The humans had survived. Against all odds, against all logic, against everything the hegemony believed. They had survived. You have weapons pointed at this world, Supreme Chancellor Vessel said, trying to maintain his authority. But if you attack, you will make enemies of every species in the galaxy. The hegemony will unite against you. The hegemony is built on lies and fear, Admiral Kang replied. Your species has controlled the galaxy for 10,000 years by making examples of anyone who questioned you. You destroyed 17 intelligent species before us. You enslaved dozens more. You claim to bring peace, but you bring only control. He gestured to someone off-screen. We have accessed your archives. We have the records of every atrocity your species has committed. Every genocide, every enslavement, every act of cruelty hidden behind propaganda and ceremonies. We are going to share those records with the entire galaxy. Supreme Chancellor Vexal's hard shell seemed to pale. You cannot. That information is classified. Those records are protected. They were protected. But your security systems were designed to stop technology you understood. Our technology is 300 years ahead of anything you have seen. Admiral Kang paused. The transmission begins in 1 hour. Every world, every species, every corner of the galaxy will learn the truth about what the hegemony really is. The assembly hall erupted into chaos. Delegates shouted questions. Security forces tried to establish control. Supreme Chancellor Vexal screamed orders that nobody followed. But Ambassador Yoon did not move. She simply stood and watched, feeling something she had not felt in a very long time. Got Hope. On the bridge of the Eternal Defiance. Admiral Kang ended the transmission and turned to his officers. Captain Yoonji Shin stood ready with her assault teams. Commander Sunwoo Wang monitored the fleets. Positions. Dr. Hyunwoo Nam confirmed that the data. Transmission was prepared. The hegemony's defensive. Fleet is moving to intercept, reported the sensor. Officer, Admiral Kang nodded. He had expected this. The hegemony would not surrender their capital without a fight. They still believed their numbers would give them victory. They still did not understand what they were facing. Deploy the Lazarus Array, he ordered. Deep within the asteroid belt that surrounded Nexus Prime, 1,000 small devices activated. They had been placed weeks ago by stealth ships that the hegemony's sensors could not detect. Each device was a weapon unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. The asteroid belt began to glow. Rocks that had drifted in space for millions of years suddenly became weapons. Plasma erupted from their surfaces, directed by the Lazarus devices, forming streams of superheated matter that crossed hundreds of thousands of kilometers in seconds. The hegemony's defensive stations simply vanished. One moment they were there, massive structures that had protected the capital for centuries. The next moment they were expanding clouds of vapor and debris. The hegemony fleet stopped advancing. For the first time in their history, they faced an enemy they did not know how to fight. Admiral Kang watched the destruction with no satisfaction. This was not revenge. This was not punishment. This was simply a demonstration, a reminder, a message to the galaxy that the rules had changed. "Transmission ready," Dr. Nam reported. "Send it," Admiral Kang said and across 10,000 worlds. The truth about the galactic hegemony began to spread. The reckoning the galaxy was burning, not with fire, but with truth. Commander Sunwoo Wang stood on the surface of Kesra 4 and watched a species learn they were not alone. The Kesrans were small creatures, barely reaching his waist, with gray skin and large dark eyes. They had been slaves of the hegemony for over 2,000 years, forced to mine rare minerals in conditions that killed thousands every month. They had never seen a human before. When Wang's dropship landed in the middle of their mining camp, they had scattered like frightened animals. They thought he was a new kind of hegemony soldier, come to punish them for some unknown crime. "We are not here to hurt you," Wang said through his translator. He removed his helmet so they could see his face. "We are humans. We have come to set you free." The oldest Kesran, a female with scars covering her arms, approached him slowly. Her eyes were filled with confusion and fear. "Humans are dead," she said. "The hegemony killed them all. Everyone knows this. The hegemony lied. We survived. And now we are here. It took hours to convince them." Wang's soldiers distributed food and medical supplies while he explained what was happening across the galaxy. He showed them recordings of the human fleet destroying hegemony ships. He played the data transmissions that revealed the truth about their masters. When the Kesrans finally understood, they wept. Not from sadness, but from something they had forgotten how to feel. Hope. This scene repeated itself across 300 worlds. On Volux Prime, Lieutenant Himinon led a team of engineers to disable the slave collars that the hegemony used to control the local population. The collars would explode if their wearers tried to escape. Millions of people had lived their entire lives with bombs around their necks. "The technology is crude," Himon reported to her commander. "We can disable them all with a wide-range electromagnetic pulse. But it will destroy every electronic system on the planet." "Do it," came the reply. The pulse went out. Every slave collar fell silent. Every control system failed. And 3 billion people took their first free breaths in 400 years. On the oceanic world of the Sara, Captain Dongyuk Seo discovered something that made his blood run cold. The hegemony had been conducting experiments on the local species, testing biological weapons designed to target specific genetic types. They were developing ways to exterminate entire species without firing a single shot. This is why they wanted to destroy humanity, Captain Seo reported to Admiral Kang. They saw our potential. They saw how quickly we were advancing. They knew that eventually we would become a threat they could not control. So they decided to eliminate us before that could happen. And if we had not escaped, they would have done the same to any species that showed too much promise. The hegemony does not allow competition. They never have. The evidence was broadcast across the galaxy. Laboratory records, experiment logs, death counts from failed weapons tests. The hegemony had killed millions in their research facilities, species that nobody had even known existed, erased from history like they had never been born. The response was immediate and violent. The Valoran Republic declared independence from the hegemony on the same day they received the transmission. Ambassador Haijin Yoon herself delivered the announcement, standing before the Valoran Grand Council with human soldiers guarding her safety. For 300 years, we have carried the shame of what we allowed to happen to humanity, she declared. We were cowards. We chose safety over justice. We watched genocide and did nothing. Today, we choose differently. Today, we stand with those who survived. Today, the Valoran Republic is free. The Ashan Confederacy followed hours later. Then, the Kasrans, newly freed from their chains. Then a dozen more species, then 100, then too many to count. The galaxy was rising against its masters. Supreme Chancellor Vessel retreated to the hegemony's fortress world, Sanctuary Prime. He gathered what remained of his loyal forces, ships and soldiers from species that had benefited from hegemony rule and feared what would happen if it fell. The humans have poisoned the galaxy against us, he told his war council. They have spread lies and propaganda, but we are still strong. We still have the largest fleet. We can still destroy them. His generals were not so confident. They had seen the human weapons at Nexus Prime. They had received reports from every battle that had followed. Human technology was beyond anything they understood. Human soldiers fought with a determination that seemed impossible to break. Human commanders made decisions that the hegemony's predictive computers could not anticipate. We should negotiate, suggested one general, a reptilian creature whose species had been partners of the hegemony for 5,000 years. Offer them territory. Offer them recognition. Perhaps we can reach a peaceful settlement. Supreme Chancellor Vessal turned on him with fury. Negotiate? With the species we tried to destroy. They will accept nothing less than our complete destruction. They are animals, driven by revenge. They cannot be reasoned with. With respect, Supreme Chancellor, that is not what our intelligence suggests. The humans have been remarkably restrained in their campaign. They have not attacked civilian populations. They have not destroyed infrastructure. They have focused entirely on military targets and liberation of enslaved species. If they wanted revenge, they could have caused far more damage. It is a trick, a strategy to make us lower our guard. When the moment is right, they will show their true nature. The general was silent. He knew there was no point in arguing. Supreme Chancellor Vexal had ruled for 400 years. He had never been wrong. He did not accept that he might be wrong now. Far from Sanctuary Prime. Intelligence Officer Naeun Lim coordinated the information war from her station aboard the Whisper, a human intelligence ship that could move through hegemony space undetected. We have complete access to their communication networks, she reported to Admiral Kang. We know every order before their own commanders receive it. We know their fleet positions, their supply routes, their defensive plans. They have no secrets from us. And the public broadcasts? Continuing. We have released evidence of 17 genocides the hegemony committed over the past 10,000 years. Public opinion across the galaxy has completely turned against them. Even species that were loyal are now questioning whether to continue fighting for masters who have lied to them for so long. Admiral Kang nodded slowly. The war was going better than he had hoped. The hegemony's military advantage was meaningless when their soldiers no longer believed in the cause they were fighting for. Every day, more ships defected to the human side. Every day, more worlds declared independence. But he knew it could not last forever. Eventually, they would have to face the hegemony's core fleet. The battle at Sanctuary Prime would decide everything. What are our current losses? He asked. Officer Lim hesitated before answering. 412 ships destroyed. Approximately 50,000 soldiers killed. The hegemony has lost over 10 times that number, but they have more to lose. If this becomes a war of attrition, we will eventually be overwhelmed. Then we need to end it quickly. Admiral Kang stood and walked to the window of his command center. Outside, the stars burned with ancient light. Somewhere out there, Earth's grave waited in the darkness, a monument to everything humanity had lost. He thought about Admiral Una Park, who had died 300 years ago to buy time for the evacuation. He thought about Director Jizu Kim, who had kept humanity alive through the years of dying. He thought about all the generations who had been born and died in the void, working toward this moment. They had not survived for revenge. They had survived for something greater. "Contact the Allied fleet commanders," he said. "We attack Sanctuary Prime in 72 hours. This ends now." Across the galaxy, human ships and their new allies began to move. The largest fleet in history was forming, a combination of species that the hegemony had oppressed for millennia, all united by the leadership of a people who had been thought dead for 3 centuries. The final battle was coming, and the hegemony, for the first time in 10,000 years, was afraid. The new dawn, the Battle of Sanctuary Prime, began at dawn. Not that there was a real dawn on the fortress world. The planet was surrounded by massive orbital platforms that blocked most of the light from its dying red sun. The hegemony had built their last stronghold in artificial darkness, a fitting symbol for everything they represented. Vice Admiral Hanuel Choi commanded the Vanguard Fleet, a collection of stealth ships designed to slip through defenses that could not be broken by force. She was young for her rank, only 34 years old, but she had proven herself in a dozen battles since the return. "All ships report ready," her communications officer announced. "Stealth systems at full power. The enemy has not detected us." Hanuel studied the tactical display. The hegemony had gathered everything they had left at Sanctuary Prime, 20,000 warships, arranged in defensive formations around the planet. Orbital weapons platforms that could destroy entire fleets. Ground-based cannons powerful enough to crack moons. "Begin Phase 1, Hanuel ordered. Her fleet moved like ghosts through the darkness. Human stealth technology was centuries ahead of anything the hegemony could detect. 100 ships slipped past patrol lines, past sensor grids, past every defense that Supreme Chancellor Vejal had put in place. They reached the orbital weapon platforms without being seen. Small teams of soldiers, wearing armor that bent light around them, boarded the stations through maintenance hatches. They moved through corridors filled with hegemony soldiers who could not see them, could not hear them, could not sense them at all. The weapons went silent one by one. Massive cannons that could vaporize capital ships simply stopped working. The hegemony technicians ran diagnostics, found nothing wrong, and could not understand why their weapons would not fire. "Phase 1 complete," Hanuel reported. "The door is open." Admiral Kang received her message aboard the Eternal Defiance, the flagship of the human fleet. Around him, 40,000 human ships waited in formation. Behind them, another 60,000 allied vessels from the species that had joined their cause. 100,000 ships against 20,000. And the hegemony's defensive systems were now useless. "All ships," Admiral Kang announced, "advance." The Allied fleet emerged from warp space like a wave of light. They appeared everywhere at once, surrounding the hegemony forces from every direction. There was no escape. There was no retreat. There was only the battle. Supreme Chancellor Vexal watched from his command center on the surface of Sanctuary Prime. His hard shell trembled as he saw the impossible numbers arrayed against him. He had ruled the galaxy for 400 years. He had destroyed species that challenged him. He had believed himself invincible. Now he knew the truth. He had never been invincible. He had simply never faced an enemy willing to fight back. "All ships attack," he ordered. "Destroy them. Destroy them all." The hegemony fleet surged forward. They were desperate, terrified, fighting not for victory, but for survival. Their ships were old designs that had not changed in thousands of years. Their tactics were predictable patterns that human computers had analyzed and countered decades ago. The battle was not a contest. It was an execution. Human weapons tore through hegemony shields like paper. Allied ships coordinated their attacks with perfect timing, overwhelming enemy vessels with concentrated fire. Hegemony commanders tried to adapt, tried to find some strategy that would work. But every move they made had already been anticipated. Captain Dong Yuxeo led his battle group against the hegemony's left flank. His ship, the Vengeful Star, was one of the new dreadnoughts built on Haven. It carried weapons that the hegemony had never seen. Shields that absorbed energy and used it to power even stronger attacks. Target their command ships, CO ordered. Cut off their coordination. One by one, the hegemony flagships fell. With each one destroyed, the enemy fleet became more chaotic, more disorganized. Ships began to flee, jumping to warp without orders, desperate to escape the slaughter. But there was nowhere to run. Human ships waited at every exit point, ready to catch those who tried to flee. The galaxy had been mapped, the routes had been predicted, and the trap had been set perfectly. On the Mercy, Medical Officer G.A. Park worked without rest. Her hospital ship had been designed to handle casualties from both sides. Human soldiers brought in wounded hegemony sailors, and she treated them with the same care she gave her own people. "Why do you help them?" asked one of her assistants, a young man who had lost his parents during the years of dying. "They tried to kill us. They destroyed our world." Dr. Park looked at the unconscious hegemony soldier on her operating table. He was just a young officer, probably following orders, probably believing the lies his masters had told him. "Because this is who we are," she said softly. "We are not what they tried to make us. We did not survive 300 years in the darkness just to become monsters ourselves. We survived so we could be something better." The battle lasted 17 hours. When it ended, the hegemony fleet had been completely destroyed. 15,000 ships drifted as wreckage around. Sanctuary Prime, 5,000 more had surrendered. When they realized resistance was hopeless, Supreme Chancellor Vexal made his final broadcast as human. Dropships descended toward his command center. His voice was weak, broken, nothing like the confident tyrant who had ordered the destruction of Earth. "I offer unconditional surrender," he said. "My forces will stand down. My species will accept whatever judgment the humans demand. One ask only for mercy." Admiral Kang's response was broadcast across the galaxy. 300 years ago, you showed humanity no mercy. You burned our world. You murdered 8 billion innocent people. You celebrated our deaths and declared us extinct. You taught the galaxy to fear you, to obey you, to accept that the strong have the right to destroy the weak. He paused, letting his words sink into the minds of every being watching. "But we are not you. We did not survive 300 years in the void to become what we hated. We did not build our strength to spread the same darkness you created. Surrender your forces. Submit to trial for your crimes. Your species will not be destroyed. Your people will not be enslaved. You will face justice, but you will live. This is the mercy you never offered us." Supreme Chancellor Vexal surrendered. The hegemony fell. 1 year later, Ambassador Myre Sol stood before the first meeting of the new Galactic Assembly. 800 species watched her, many of them former subjects of the hegemony, all of them uncertain about what the future would hold. She was not a soldier. She was not a scientist. She was simply a woman born on Haven who had spent her entire life studying diplomacy and dreaming of a galaxy at peace. 300 years ago, you watched us die, she said. Her voice was steady, confident, carrying across the vast assembly hall. Today, we stand before you not as conquerors, but as partners. Not as masters, but as equals. We have not come to replace the hegemony. We have come to make sure nothing like it ever rises again. She looked out at the assembled delegates. Valorans, who had finally shed their guilt. Keshrans, who had never known freedom before. Dozens of species that had been enslaved, oppressed, controlled for millennia. Humanity remembers the darkness. We lived in it for 3 centuries. We were born in it, raised in it, shaped by it. But we did not let it consume us. We emerged from the void, not to spread that darkness, but to ensure it never falls upon another world. Fleet Admiral Byung-Hoon Kang watched from the observation deck above the assembly. Around him stood the commanders who had led humanity through the war. Vice Admiral Han-Yul Choi, Captain Dong-Hyuk Seo, Commander Sunwoo Wang, Intelligence Officer Naao Lim, Dr. G.A. Park, all of them survivors. All of them builders. All of them proof that humanity could not be destroyed. "Do you think it will work?" asked Captain Seo quietly. "Peace, after everything that happened." Admiral Kang thought for a long moment before answering. "I do not know. Peace is harder than war. It requires trust, compromise, patience. Things that do not come easily to any species." He looked down at Ambassador Song as she continued her speech. As the delegates began to respond, as the first tentative steps toward a new galactic order were taken. "But I believe we have to try. We did not survive for revenge. We did not build our fleet to become new tyrants. We survived because humans refused to give up, refused to accept defeat, refused to stop hoping even when hope seems impossible." He smiled slightly, the first real smile he had allowed himself in years. "We survived to build something better. And now, finally, we have the chance." Far away, beyond the light of any star, the planet Haven orbited silently in the void. It would remain humanity's home, their sanctuary, the reminder of the darkness they had survived. But its children now walked among the stars, partners in a galaxy that was learning to be free. The hegemony had tried to destroy humanity. They had failed, not because humans were stronger, not because they were smarter, but because they simply refused to die. They had turned extinction into survival, survival into strength, and strength into hope. And now, 300 years after the fall of Earth, humanity was finally home. Not on any single planet, not in any one system, but everywhere, among every species, in every corner of a galaxy that would never forget what they had done. They had returned from the dead. They had top,